It doesn't matter if you've filmed your videos using the correct camera settings, used the right lens, used great lighting, got great sound, and everything else, if you're just going to go ahead and ruin that in the edit. Mistakes are a really important part of learning. If you can do something wrong, learn why you did it wrong, and understand how you can do it right next time, then hopefully you shouldn't make that mistake again. That's how learning works. But the mistakes that I'm going to mention in this video are mistakes that most video editors will have made at the beginning of their career. So by watching this video, hopefully you'll understand what to look out for and realize if you are making this mistake as well. And then hopefully you can learn from that and improve. So the first mistake that I see most beginner filmmakers and video editors making is not taking advantage of keyboard shortcuts. Keyboard shortcuts are used by intermediate and professional video editors, and it just means rather than going into all of the menus to find specific things and clicking across the screen all the time, you can save time by simply pressing a button. Now, I edit in Adobe Premiere Pro. I'm not saying you have to, but if you go into the keyboard shortcuts menu on Premiere or any other editing software, you'll see all of the keyboard shortcuts available for you. All of these keyboard shortcuts are designed to save you a few seconds here and a few seconds there. And all of those few seconds added up over time are going to equate to minutes, which will eventually equate to hours and days. So keyboard shortcuts are going to help you to save time, which will allow you to stay in that creative flow. And rather than searching menus, you can just press a button and keep creating. The next mistake that I see is selecting all or the wrong shots. It doesn't matter if you've filmed 100 shots, you don't have to use 100 shots in your video edit. Only pick the best shots. This is what all filmmakers will do. They'll only use the less than perfect shots when they've run out of those perfect shots. So don't get precious over the footage that you've filmed. It might have taken you an hour to hike up a hill to get this perfect shot, but if it doesn't look great or it doesn't work in the edit, don't use it. I think most people, when they get started in video editing, they feel like they have to use everything. So they throw all of the shots into the timeline and they squeeze everything together. You want to let the edit breathe a little bit. So you want to have spacing. You want to let each shot play out for a few seconds. And if you're showing 100 shots into a 30-second video, it's going to be very quick moving. Each shot is not going to have time to breathe. And you can't assure the quality of every single shot is going to be perfect. You want to select the best shots, both visually and the shots that serve the story the best. So don't feel like you have to use every single shot just because you've captured it. And also don't get too emotional over shots that you've captured because they might not be right for the story. Only use the shots that are right for the story. I also see people not understanding how to set up a sequence correctly. When you're creating a video project, you want to make sure that your sequence is set up for how you want to export this. So if you want a 1920 by 1080, 25 frames per second video, you want to set the sequence up to this, because if you go ahead and set up a 4:3 project, it's 4K, it's 60 frames per second. When it comes to working with your footage, it's not going to play back right. And when you come to export this, it's going to be in the wrong aspect ratio. So it's really important that you set up the sequence first. I also see beginner video editors overusing effects and transitions. The whip pan transition might look great, but only when it's used 3 or 4 times in a project. If you're doing it between every shot, then it's just going to look really random. We're going to be all over the place and it's going to get overused and the effect of the transition is just going to disappear. And that's the same for effects and all other transitions as well. If you're using it too much, then unfortunately the effect is just going to wear off. But then on the opposite side of that same coin, if you're only using an effect once, it might feel a bit out of place. If we're hard cutting between every single shot, and then all of a sudden there's a whip pan transition and we go back to hard cutting, that whip pan transition is going to feel really out of place. The viewer will be confused and it just won't sit right. It would be out of place. So if you're going to use an effect or a transition, use it a handful of times, but no more than that. You don't want to confuse people, but you also don't want to make people bored of this effect or this transition. So find that balancing act. I also see people not color grading or correcting their footage, or if they do, going for the wrong color grade. A lot of people will throw log footage into the timeline and think, great, it looks good. I was going for that washed out look. Let's export. Well, unfortunately, you need to do a little bit of color correction and color grading to get the color information in. Don't just settle for flat log footage. add a little bit of contrast in, increase the saturation, warm it up or cool it down. And then of course, think about the purpose of the video. If you are doing a video for a care home, you want this to feel warm and loving. So you want to lean into a rich, saturated, warm color grade. But if you crush all of the shadows and you make it really contrasted and you cool it down so it's blue, it's going to feel harsh, cold, and it's not the tone that we're looking for. We're looking for a pleasant, saturated, warm video. So really think about the purpose of the video and think, how does the color affect the tone of the video? Because color can have a massive effect on how the video feels. And last up, I always see people not exporting their videos correctly. They either export them in the wrong aspect ratio, they're compressing them too much, or they're just going for some really random setting because they don't know what they're supposed to be pressing. Don't just press random buttons in the hope it would look good. Fully understand why you're exporting in these settings. Because if you overcompress a video, it will look terrible and it will just undo all of the hard work that you did filming and editing that video. Of course, there are loads more mistakes that you might make when you're editing a video, but these are the most common ones that I see most beginner video editors making. Of course, though, like I mentioned, mistakes are a really important part of learning anything, especially video creation. So if you do make these mistakes, don't worry, just learn from them next time. And that's how we're going to keep getting better and better. But definitely make sure you are practicing and editing as much as possible. Even if you've got nothing to film, you could download some stock footage and have a play with stock footage. I think I was editing on Adobe Premiere for around 4 or 5 years before I actually did my first paid job and edited that job with Adobe Premiere. I'm not saying you have to go that long, I'm just saying put the work in and make sure you know the program before you actually start to take on any serious projects or any paid work.